how to replace the front brake pads in a 2011 through 2016 Toyota Sienna. And looks like the brake pads are pretty worn once we pull them out. One thing that we did is we turned the wheels out. That way you have easier access. It's easier to see these bolts and work with the calipers. It just makes it a lot easier. So turn your wheels out, and then when you do the other side, you'll also turn the steering wheel out. First thing you need to do is you need to get the equipment to jack up your tire. If you'll open up this little compartment here, you'll see a lot of different things. You'll want to get this lever to jack up your tire, and then the jack is found in here. Okay, so here you have the tire iron. You can just go ahead and pull that out. You'll need that. So you need to turn the end of your jack counterclockwise, and it was really difficult to do, so we're just using some pliers to turn it counterclockwise. Once you get it going, then you can get it out. So now that we got the jack out, we got the tire iron, and we've got the crank, we can go ahead and jack up the car. Now what you want to do is you want to raise this up, and if you'll look under here, you can see a couple of slots here. You want to put your jack in between those two slots. We'll just raise it up by hand, and you want to make sure that this area, it goes right up into the jack. There you go. It goes right up into those two grooves. Now you're going to hook on the tool to crank it up. One other thing you'll want to do before you start raising your car up is you'll want to put the emergency brake on. So anytime you raise or you jack your car up, you'll always want to put on the emergency brake. One thing you want to do before you take your tire off is you want to before you jack your tire up, you want to loosen up the lug nuts. So get them a little bit loose so it makes it a lot easier. And it's best to use your own body weight, but in this case I can't because we've turned the wheels. Because if you jack it up and then try to loosen the lug nuts, the tire will turn. So once you loosen all the lug nuts, then we'll go ahead and raise the car up. You just want to get it a little bit off the ground. Then we'll go ahead and continue to loosen the lug nuts. You know, the next thing you're going to do is just go ahead and pull your tire off. And if you have jack stands, it's good to put some jack stands underneath, just as an extra precaution. Now the next thing you'll want to do is just go ahead and remove these two bolts. It's a 14mm socket. You'll just go ahead and remove. There's one up here, and then there's one down below. Just remove those, again with a 14mm socket. You can remove those by hand. You may have to use 11/16 wrench, an open-end wrench, and hold that. Sometimes that will turn with your bolt. In this case, we didn't have to. Or you could possibly use some needle nose pliers just to secure that as you release the bolt. So once you remove those two bolts, You'll then go ahead and pull the caliper off. And you can use some zip ties and tie it up to your spring. I'm just going to rest it up here. Got to be careful. You don't want to kink the hose. You got to be really careful with that. You don't want to wreck any of the wiring. So we're just going to set it up here. Should be okay. Just got to be real careful with the wires and everything else. Okay, you can then see there are two springs that you have to release to get the brake pads off. You just go ahead and pull the springs out. There's a set here, and then there's a set down here. So you just go ahead and pull those out. And you may need a screwdriver to get your brake pads out, but in this case they're fairly loose. I'll just go ahead and pull them out. We'll then just want to pry the brake pads out. You can use a screwdriver. I'm just using the tire jack. Once you get them out a little bit, you can just go ahead and pull them off. You can see that they are fairly worn. This other one's really bad. You can't really see. So I'll just pry it out a little bit and then pull it off. But you can see this is worn really bad. It's almost down to the steel. So it's a good thing we're replacing the brake pads. We're then going to pull out the pins, and we'll clean them up, we'll wipe them off, and then we're going to put some new brake grease on them, and hopefully that will keep it sliding the way that it should. So as you can see, we've loaded it up with grease, and we wiped it off first of all, cleaned it out. Now we'll just go ahead and insert the pin back in. And you want to make sure you get the seal around the pin. So I will go ahead and do that. So we did insert the pin. It's covering the bolt, and it moves freely, and that's what you want. It needs to be able to slide back and forth, and so we should be good to go. And you'll do the same thing with the lower pin. You'll pull that out, and then go ahead and clean it off, lube it up with the brake grease, and then go ahead and put it back in. The brake grease that we're using is Sil Glide. You can get that on Amazon or at any of your auto parts stores. We got this at Advanced Auto, and seems to work really well. So we did go ahead and remove the pin. We put some grease on it. Again, it slides really good, really well, and so should be good to go. One thing you want to do is just clean around the brake parts. You may want to wipe this down a little bit and then add a little bit of grease. That'll help keep your brakes from squeaking. You can just wipe them down a little bit. I like to do that, and then just throw a little bit of brake grease on the pads, and that can eliminate some of the squeaking. So when you open up the package, you're going to find all the hardware. I usually don't use it. I may use some of them. I may use the springs. I like to just leave what's in there in place, and may just clean them up a little bit. But then you'll have the 4 brake pads. And one thing you want to do when you do take your brake pads off, you want to just take a look and see how they were inserted. For example, when you put these on, see where the clips are. So when you take them off, it's a good idea to either video or take a picture so you know how to insert the new pads and where to put the clips. Because they do have these clips on there that what they're for is to let you know when your brake pads are getting low. Your brakes will start, this metal clip right here will start pressing up against your rotor, and it will make a squeaking sound. So I've decided to put the new clip on that comes with it. So what I did is I put this clip on, and I just use this to push it down to make sure that it's close. We're then going to grease this up a little bit. We want to Make sure that it doesn't squeak, so we'll put a little bit of grease, brake grease on here. That'll keep it from squeaking. We'll put a little bit on here and maybe a little bit on the back side. You want to try and avoid touching the pads with the grease. You don't want that to get onto your rotors. So we'll just put a little bit of grease on here. Help avoid the brakes from squeaking. So you can see the difference between the new pad and the old pad. This was really worn out. It's a good thing we were replacing it. Then basically what you do is you just go ahead and slide it on. You have to press that down a little bit to slide that in. And you just go ahead and compress it. And there you have one side. We'll then go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we're going to put the clip on the other side. Again, this just helps you to know whether your brakes are wearing out or not. I just put it in there. I'm going to use this to compress it a little bit. You can see there's a little bit of gap. This will help get it on a little bit better. So there we have it. And then we're going to grease it up again. Same thing on this one. We'll grease this up. Get a little bit of grease on it. And then again, you just go ahead and you'll slide it in here. Got to make sure this is down low. It's kind of hard to see. So we've pushed the top end in. Now we're just going to slide that in. Looks like we're good to go. We put the new springs on. What they do is they just keep the brake pads from always making contact with the rotor. It keeps them separated. So you'll see there are two holes down here. You just slide it in and then slide the other side in the other hole. And it'll kind of separate them a little bit. And so you'll have to compress them a little bit before you put the calipers on. So we're just going to remove the brake fluid top because when you compress the calipers, it's going to force the fluid in to the cylinder. That'll just relieve some of that pressure. We're going to use this brake pad spreader. Again, we bought this at Advanced Auto Parts. And basically what you do is you're going to slide this in here. And we put the brake pad here. Actually, we'll probably go this way. And we're going to use that to compress the calipers. So you can see we're going to turn this and it will push the calipers in. We may have to do it on both sides because you can see it's getting this side but not so much on the other side. And the reason why we're doing this is because you've got to get the caliper in so that it will fit over the brake pads. So now we're just compressing the other side. A lot of brake cylinders only have one, so you only have to do it once, but this has two cylinders, so we need to compress both of them. Now we're just going to take this off and hopefully just slide this back on. Now remember, those springs help spread it out, so we've got to compress that a little bit more. And then you just go ahead and slide this back on. There we have it. And then you just line up your bolts. And again, it's a 14 millimeter bolt. We'll just hand tighten that, and then we'll get the bottom on. And just go ahead and hand tighten the bolt as far as you can. And you may have to hold this a little bit, otherwise it might, this bolt right here, otherwise sometimes it will start turning. You can see that's turning, so we're going to use some pliers to just hold on to that. It's an 11/16 inch bolt. We don't have an open-end wrench for that, so we're just going to use some pliers to hold on to it so we can get it tight. And you just do the same thing down below. And there you have it. Okay, so now we'll just go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, and then you're good to go. One thing you always want to look at is the rotors. Make sure that the rotors are still. Sometimes when you get some shaking when you brake, especially going downhill, that's probably letting you know that the rotors either need to be turned or you need to replace them. But we haven't had that, so we're just going to keep the same rotors. Thanks for watching Big Al Repairs, and hopefully you subscribe.